In this episode, I want to examine a fact so large that the people have stopped seeing it. The Jewish people number roughly 15 million, about 0.2% of humanity, 2 in 1,000. Yet since the Nobel Prizes began in 1901, on the order of a fifth of the laureates in the sciences have been Jews, a proportion running to something like 100-fold beyond population share. Einstein and Wigner, whose unreasonable effectiveness we studied, Penzias, who heard the echo of the beginning, Bekenstein, who counted the information on the black hole, Salk and Sabin against polio, Rita Levi-Montalcini, hiding from the fascists, doing Nobel-caliber neurology in a bedroom laboratory. So what happened? Let me first rule out the crude answer, because Judaism itself rules it out. The explanation is not in the blood. The Torah is not a genetic endowment. Converts stand among the tradition's greatest figures. Onkelos, whose translation we quote weekly. Rabbi Akiva, descended from converts, whose name is on nearly every page of the Talmud. The explanation I want to put in front of you is cultural, and it is checkable. 3,000 years of covenant built a specific set of mental habits. And when the doors of the universities finally opened, those habits turned out to be exactly the habits science requires. If I'm right, the scientific temperament is not merely compatible with Judaism, as we have argued all series, it is one of Judaism's exports. Exhibit 1, literacy. Nearly 2,000 years ago, Jewish law did something no other ancient society attempted. It made the schooling of children a universal religious obligation. The Talmud in Baba Basra 21a credits Yehoshua ben Gamla in the 1st century with ordaining that teachers be appointed in every province and in every town, and that children enter school at 6 or 7, adding that were it not for him, Torah would have been forgotten from Israel. Universal compulsory education as a ritual requirement, while the surrounding world reserved letters for scribes and aristocrats. For century after century, when the ordinary man of every nation signed with a mark, the ordinary Jew, the tailor, the water carrier, could read because his religion is a text and an illiterate Jew cannot fully practice it. Economic historians have traced the consequences across the medieval world. But see it from this series angle. A civilization that defines piety as reading comprehension aimed its children for hundreds of generations at precisely the faculty science would one day demand. Exhibit 2. How the text is studied. Walk into yeshiva on any day, anywhere on earth and listen. You will not hear a library hush. You will hear a roar. Hundreds of pairs of students, Chavrutas, arguing at full voice. That is the Talmud being studied as it was made, because the Talmud is not a book of conclusions, it is a book of arguments. 2.5 million words in which the dissenting opinion is not deleted but preserved, named, and studied forever. The law follows Beis Hillel, yet Beis Shammai's reasoning is kept on the page, and the Talmud says of the two schools, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim, these and those are the words of the living God. The tradition canonized its own disputes. It taught every student that an objection, a kushya, is a contribution, that the sharpest question wins a seat of honor, and in the famous story of the oven of Achnai, that even a heavenly voice does not override the argument, because the Torah is not in heaven. Now set that beside the method of science, conjecture, refutation, peer review, the institutionalized challenge, and tell me the resemblance is coincidence. When the grandchildren of the Beit Midrash walked into the physics seminars of Berlin and Göttingen, they did not need to know how to behave there. They had been rehearsing for 2 millennia. If you want the whole culture in one documented anecdote, Isidore Isaac Rabi, Nobel laureate in physics, discoverer of the principle behind the MRI, was asked why he became a scientist. He answered with his mother. Every other mother in Brooklyn, he said, greeted her child after school with, "Did you learn anything today?" His mother asked a different question. "Izzy, did you ask a good question today?" And Rabi concluded, that difference made me a scientist. Where did an immigrant woman with little schooling learn that the question outranks the answer? From a tradition whose central family ceremony, the Seder, is engineered so that the child asks 4 questions. The youngest voice handed the opening move of the evening. The Seder is, amongst other things, the oldest continuously running seminar in critical inquiry on earth. Mrs. Rabi was simply teaching the curriculum. Exhibit 3. Subtler and possibly decisive. Metaphysical expectations. Science rests on 2 enormous assumptions it cannot itself prove: that the universe is lawful, one order governing all things, and that it is intelligible, matched to the human mind. A culture of capricious gods, a storm god feuding with a sea god, has little reason to expect one law from sky to cellar. The Jew recited twice daily, "The Lord is one author, therefore one order." Jeremiah 33:25 speaks of God's covenant with day and night, the statutes of heaven and earth. Historians of science have long argued that exactly this expectation, a single rational lawgiver, was the soil of the scientific revolution. And intelligibility, the Jew had in the strongest form on record, made B'Tselem Elokim, in the image of the mind that ordered the world, and commanded, as Maimonides ruled in a passage we read in our first episode, to contemplate the worlds as the very method of loving God. When Einstein marveled that the world is comprehensible, the tradition had a doctrine on file explaining why it should be. And Exhibit 4, History's Cruel Accelerant, Exclusion. Barred from guilds and lands across medieval Europe, Jews were pushed into the portable professions: trade, medicine, and finance, where the only capital that cannot be confiscated at the border is carried in the head. A people repeatedly stripped of everything else compressed the lesson into a sentence every immigrant mother knew: they can take everything from you except your education. When the universities cracked open in the 19th century, there stood a population that had been preparing for the entrance examination in effect for 700 years. Now let me forestall the melancholy conclusion someone will draw, that the secular Jewish scientist inherits the goods while the faith was disposable scaffolding. History itself answers. The Covenant kept producing scientists who never left the study hall. The Vilna Gaon urged the translation of the sciences and wrote on geometry and astronomy. Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan was a physicist, and in our own generation, Robert Aumann received the Nobel in economic science for the mathematics of repeated games. A man who keeps Shabbos, studies Talmud daily, and credits the Gemara with sharpening the very intuitions the prize rewarded. So the next time someone in your family wins a science fair and the relative size that the child is so secular, you may tell them, with 3 exhibits and an anecdote behind you, that the child is practicing one of the oldest family trades. Next episode, our final episode, 2 books, 1 author, the summation of the whole argument, and what to actually do with it.